Thank you, Jon. Good afternoon. My name is Ida, and this is my colleague, Håvard. I would like to start by telling you a bit about where we come from, not just geographically, but professionally. At Analyse og Tall, which translates to analysis and numbers, we work to make sense of complex topics like democracy, digital spaces, participation, and volunteering. We're based in Copenhagen and Oslo, and since 2014, we've grown into a team of around 25 people. But what makes us a bit different is how we're organized. We're not led by a CEO or a boardroom full of executives. Instead, we're a democratically run, employee-owned cooperative. That means that every one of us helps to steer the company, and every one of us owns part of it. Decisions are made together. It's not always easy, but we believe it's worth it. And we believe that that kind of thinking about democracy, collaboration, and ownership matters just as much in the workplace as it does in society. One of the areas that we focus on is digital data, because in today's world, it's everywhere. To give you a sense of the scale, just last Thursday, Norwegian politicians and editorial news outlets posted nearly 3,000 updates on Facebook. In only 3 days, those posts sparked almost 50,000 comments. That's a lot of interaction, a lot of emotion, and a lot of data. And the thing is, we are all part of that. Each of us, in our daily lives, leave little traces of ourselves online. You could think of them as digital breadcrumbs. We walk to work while listening to Spotify. We like our friend's vacation photo. We comment on a news story, or search Google for something personal, sometimes very personal. And while not all of that data is public, much of it forms part of the digital spaces where public life increasingly takes place. When we engage in discussions online, when we search, like, or share, we're not just consuming content, we're helping shape conversations. We're contributing to the data landscape. So, today we want to walk you through what we've learned from looking at this kind of digital data. We will start by exploring the sources, where it comes from, and what's accessible. Then we'll talk about how we try to make sense of it, how we decode and interpret it. After that, we will share 4 examples of how this plays out in practice. And finally, we will come back to the big picture, why all of this matters. Because data isn't just numbers. It's a reflection of how people live, interact, and participate. And if we want to understand society today, we need to understand the digital spaces where so much of that happens. So let's get started.
Thanks. So today we're going to talk about our data-driven analysis. And I think all of these types of data types that you're seeing here is probably very familiar to you. We use most of them in our analysis. Although I have to say, I went to a lightning talk today and I heard someone talk about half terabyte as not a lot of data. So I think we have different types of perspectives on scale. We're a small company. Our DevOps operation is 5 people. So unlike, I guess, a lot of you, we don't harvest enormous amounts of data. But we're very focused on getting the right type of data, and it's very specific to the types of discussions or themes that we're interested in exploring. And today, we're mostly going to talk about our projects, which is based on data from social media platforms. It's a small part of what we're doing, but it's what we're going to be showing you today, and we look at everything from fringe media platforms to mainstream media platforms. It could be anything from like drug sale on Telegram and Snapchat to local groups in your town on Facebook, people talking about knitting. It's sort of the whole spectrum. It depends on what we're trying to understand and get information on. The reason why we think that's interesting is a lot of our colleagues comes from sociology, and we have a large team of computational humanists. So we're interested in this because we think it provides another layer of understanding behavior and how people act, and not just how they think they act or respond to questions about how they act. So I think the best projects for us is where we are able to combine both quantitative and qualitative insights, but it often starts with digital data. But it's important to say that we're not interested as a company to look at what individuals are thinking or expressing. We're interested in trying to get a better understanding of the broader trends and patterns that are evolving online. So it's very important for me to stress that we don't look at individuals when we run our analysis. But today we're going to talk about 4 areas which has been very interesting for us to work with. The first one is trying to map out the extent of hate speech online. We've done a lot of work on that in Scandinavia. Then we're going to look at digital hate against minorities, with a couple of cases from Norway. Then we're going to look at some online polarization projects. And finally, talk a bit about election integrity, where we try to help safeguard our elections in Norway with web data and analysis based on web data.
Okay. So the same platforms that connect us can also be breeding grounds for hostility. And studies show that online hate and harassment are pushing people, especially some groups of people, out of public debate. And that's the paradox. The very tool that was supposed to strengthen free speech can also silence it. At our organization, we wanted to understand this better. So we built something called Attack, a tool that uses AI to map verbal attacks in social media, helping us uncover who is most at risk in today's digital debate. Before we dive into it, we just want to inform you that some of the quotes and examples that I will be showing can be triggering and contain harsh language. But why does it matter to look at this? Because we know that online hate doesn't necessarily stay online. In 2022, there was a terror attack in Norway that targeted the LGBTQ+ community in Oslo. And in the lead up to this tragedy, many from the community had already felt a rise in online hate. And research shows a link. Inflammatory language online can forecast real-world violence, especially against marginalized groups. We needed a way to understand what's happening online. So, for the past 6 years, we have custom-built AI for detecting online hate speech in several languages. What makes this different is scale and precision. We analyze millions of public posts instead of relying on classical survey methods. So we can document exactly how hate speech plays out in real time. And the results are clear. Women, LGBTQ+ people, and religious and ethnic minorities bear a disproportionate share of online abuse. The way we did this was through machine learning. We trained an AI that can identify verbal attacks and hate speech in text. To train the model, we manually labeled thousands of comments to teach the algorithm how to recognize verbal attacks. Anything from slurs and threats to degrading language. We wanted to identify types of harsh communication that could prevent people from participating in the public debate. Hate speech is therefore a subset of verbal attacks. Hate speech is defined as verbal attacks that are directed towards protected characteristics, such as, for example, race and skin color. And then we trained our classifier to identify verbal attacks and hate speech. We named the model Attack. The result is a model that reads online conversations and flags verbal attacks with a high degree of accuracy. Then, we tested the model to analyze the public debate in Norway. Out of 10.5 million Facebook comments, around 1.7% of all those comments were verbal attacks. And within that, we found that 41,000 met the definition of hate speech. So, what is being said and to whom? We found that topics like Islam, immigration, and crime triggered the most toxic discussions. And when it comes to hate speech, one group stood out. Muslims were the target in nearly a third of the cases. And gender plays a role too. 17% of all hate speech was aimed at women, compared to just 2% directed at men. And it's not just the volume. The nature of attacks on women is deeply personal. Words like whore, comments about their bodies, while men are mostly criticized for their opinions or their actions. We wanted to go deeper, to ask, so, what kind of hate is being spread, and how has it evolved? Let's look at two groups where we have complemented our quantitative analysis methods with qualitative, LGBTQ+, and the Sami people, an indigenous group in Norway. We analyzed nearly 500,000 tweets and Facebook posts from 2018 to 2022 related to LGBTQ+ issues. And with help from Amnesty International Norway and FREE, the Association of Gender and Sexuality Diversity, we built a targeted keyword list to find relevant posts on social media. And what we saw was striking. The conversation about LGBTQ+ issues, especially trans people and trans rights, exploded in volume. In 2022, there were 16 times more trans-related tweets than in 2018. But the tone changed too. Criticism of trans people rose. By 2022, over half of all tweets about trans topics were critical. Supportive voices declined, and pride itself became a more controversial subject, often framed as ideological. In 2018, only 16% of pride-related tweets were critical. By 2022, that had increased to 27%. In summary, we find that conversations about pride on Twitter over the past 5 years shows the emergence of a more critical view of pride, where pride is attributed an increasingly negative and ideological motive. We have also studied the public discourse about the Sami people, an indigenous community in Norway, that according to research faces frequent harassment and discrimination in Norway. Using data from Facebook groups and public pages, which amounted to over 200,000 comments, we applied our AI tools and added qualitative analysis to get a more in-depth view on the discussions. And what we found was that 1 in 4 comments on Sami-related topics were negative or presented a stereotypical view of Sami people.
So I'm going to talk a bit about our work on trying to understand online polarization. We think it's an important topic, and it can obviously be looked at from many different angles. I'm going to present a couple of concrete projects that we did. One way of looking at it is how information, the same type of information, is shared online in different types of communities. So we did this work for the Norwegian fact-checking organization Faktisk, where we followed information from 5 alternative news medias in Norway. The Norwegian ones of you will know them very well. And then we looked at where specifically the URLs from these 5 domains was shared on Facebook. So based on just following links, basically, we could map out an overview of different types of communities on Facebook in Norwegian, which are sharing content from sources which is known to produce a lot of misinformation. So this was used, this is an interactive network which you can go online. You can't see the URL, but I'm sure someone will share this afterwards. And you can dive into the different types of communities which are sharing information from these 5 domains. And Faktisk used that as reporting, a base for reporting on this type of phenomenon. Next, we looked at how the discourse online on Facebook and X looked when people were debating the child welfare services in Norway. So we've gathered 1,000 links to news articles, editorials, YouTube videos, etc., which in some way talked about the topic. And then we looked at how those links were shared online. So that, for those of you who are used to watching network graphs, you will know that the nodes and the connection between them, the edges, sort of say something about how often something, in this case, how often something is shared between the nodes. So the gray nodes are domains, and the blue nodes are Facebook groups, and the green nodes are X profiles. So the closer the nodes are to each other, the higher likelihood of them sharing the same type of information. So what we found was a lot of support groups on Facebook, especially, which are very critical to the child welfare services. They shared a lot of the same negative type of information. And then we had groups which supports people working in the services, which shared completely different information. And what we found, of course, is that people don't talk to each other and people don't share the same information on this subject specifically. So this was used by an NGO to sort of help them, help inform their work on this specific matter in Norway. Another way, of course, is to look at how we're talking about something. So we looked at 4 very polarized debates in Norway. And during the previous local elections in Norway, we looked at how these 4 topics were discussed on different Facebook pages for local media in Norway. So the way we did that was we utilized a large language model to help us categorize content as either positive towards, for example, nuclear power, or negative, or neutral, or just wondering about the subject. And then based on that, we developed very simple metrics, actually, just to say something about how the debate looked in specifically Facebook, so the comment threads to one specific Facebook post from a Norwegian media. And then we try and map out the discourse which is happening. So what we would normally label as echo chambers, maybe not the most useful term, but at least places where there's not a lot of discussion happening which has opposing views. We're just agreeing with each other, either that wind power is great or nuclear power is the worst. Those would be in the top right corner, whereas maybe more debate which is actually balanced, and when we observe both sides of the debate, that would be more in the middle. And in the lower corner, we would have typically debates where we don't have a lot of opinion, so maybe more neutral statements or just questions. And the way we did this was collect data from Facebook. They have an open API. So this is data from official Facebook pages, so we can collect that. And the comments to those posts, which is either talking about wind power, which is the biggest one, or pride, nuclear power, or child welfare services, those comments are anonymized. And then we look at the content and try to get an understanding of how the debate is. So our findings based on these 4 topics was a bit interesting. I think from a Norwegian perspective, we thought this debate on child welfare services would be way more up in the right corner. So the way to understand this graph is that the more dark the color, the more negative the overall debate in one comment thread is. And of course, if it's more up to the right, it's a debate which is more based on opinions which is on the same side. So the debate on nuclear power was mainly positive, a bit balanced but positive. And also the debate on pride was quite balanced. We found one singular echo chamber up there, a small comment thread, obviously. But then when we look at wind power, something is quite different. And for you who live in Norway, you will recognize this. Wind power has become a really hot topic in Norway. There's a lot of people that are against building wind power. And what we found was quite a lot of comment threads where you would mainly find negative comments about building renewable energy. So that's another way of understanding polarization. Finally, I'm going to talk about our work on election integrity, and this is based on our work that we do for the Norwegian government, connected to our local elections, municipality elections, and the national elections. So together with the Norwegian Defense Research Establishment, we have produced reports going back to 2021 when we had our national parliament election, and then we had a local election in 2023. And we just published a report on 2024 where we didn't have any elections, but we were interested in understanding how the ecosystem of online was shaped during that time. And currently we're working on the final report in this project, where we have a parliament election in Norway in September. So the way we work here is that we gather data from a lot of different social media sites. Back in 21, it was a smaller project, so we only worked with Facebook and Twitter, as it was called then. Since then, we've included Telegram and TikTok, which TikTok obviously is an important platform in Norway, whereas Telegram is not that much used by Norwegians, but it's a very important infrastructure, especially for the spread of Russian disinformation. And as this is being in Norway, we followed the national threat assessments, which has specifically named Russia and China as the key threat actors for Norway. So we look at specifically Russian and Chinese sources, social media profiles, domains, which are linked to state-controlled entities. And again, the scale is not impressive for you because you work in terabytes and petabytes and everything. But for us, as a small company, looking at just a few months of activity, it's enough. And so what we do is collect relevant information from these social media sites. When we can use an API, we use an API. If we can't use an API, we either use an open source web scraper solution or we develop our own solutions. Depends on what gets the job done. And of course, if somebody had all of this data available, we wouldn't have to develop scrapers to do this. So it's very interesting to be here today. And one of the analysis that we did was look at something called coordinated behavior, which can be a proxy to better understand inauthentic behavior. So information that is being shared in a way which is not sort of human. The way we look at it here is that we collect all of the links which is shared within the data set that I showed you. And then we look at if the same link is shared by me and you multiple times within a really short time span. And if that happens at least 3 times, I appear in this graph. So each node here, each circle, is a social media profile. If it's blue, then it's on Facebook. If it's purple, then it's on Telegram. And if it's orange, it's on X. And what we found from that analysis is that we found a lot of different components which showed very specific traits. So we found a really huge Spanish language cluster, which was mainly tied to South American countries, for example. We found a small Norwegian cluster of comments on Facebook, which included links. Then we found a small French network. All of these Facebook groups are using French as their language. And finally, we found English-speaking profiles connected to the Chinese state-controlled media. And so this graph shows you how we work with a lot of different types of data. We enrich the data. So we, for example, use natural language processing to induce the language that the content is written in, for example. And of course, we use links here. But you could do this with the same types of videos or images, etc. So one of the interesting clusters was this, which showed how information is spanning languages and spanning platforms. And I think for a lot of us that has looked at this question for a long time, we sort of focused on one platform. But of course, information does not live within a silo, and it continues its life after you log off. So we see that the same links are being shared across multiple platforms. In this case, we saw that a lot of stuff originated from at least Telegram accounts that write content in the Russian language. And then it spreads out to mainstream platforms such as Facebook. We never found anything connected to Norway here, and our focus was Norway. But we found this again and again, just saying from a Nordic context, a small Swedish cluster. So from many of our analysis, we've seen that Sweden is more prone to this type of potential inauthentic behavior. So finally, why does this matter? First of all, we think that hate speech undermines the potential participation in society. Like, we lose voices, we lose important perspectives, and we could lose civic engagement overall if people have a really negative experience online. As Ida said, what happens online doesn't stay online, and we think that these types of analysis can help us better understand where this happens, and hopefully also what kind of initiatives and activities we can set sail to try and diminish the problem. Unfortunately, we've seen, at least in the Norwegian context, that minority groups are especially prone to this problem, and thankfully our work has been used by different NGOs and the Norwegian government to initiate action plans to try and stop it, or at least try and reduce the problem. We've looked at a lot of polarizing debates online, and we think it's important to try and understand where does it happen, on what kind of subjects, in what, like, can we sort of say something about the ecosystem where it happens, and how those debates are sparked, which becomes very polarized. We looked at, for example, how politicians communicate to their potential voters, and the voice of tone is super important, for example. So I think that can tell us a lot about how we should be communicating online to try and reduce it. And finally, we believe it's really important to try and safeguard our democratic elections in the online space. And one of the ways of doing that is better understanding how information is shared and debated, and looking more into into how that happens online. So that was us. Thank you.